There is a particular hour in the palace that belongs to no one. It comes long after the last footman has banked the fires, and long before the first scullery maid rakes them alive again. A hollow, breathing stillness in which the great house of Harrogate seems to hold its own weight and listen to it. On the night everything changed, I was standing my post at the head of the East Gallery when that hour arrived, and I remember thinking, as I had thought 100 nights before, that a man could learn more about a kingdom from what it did in the dark than from all its daylight ceremonies put together. My name is Aldous Kern, and for 11 years I had worn the red wool and the tall black bearskin of the Royal Guard of Eldermore. I had stood at the coronation and at 2 state funerals. I had marched behind the caisson that carried the late Queen Isolde to her rest, and I had stood unmoving, while the whole realm wept around me and I was not permitted to. Discipline is a strange trade. You are paid to be furniture until the moment you are paid to be the only thing in the room that matters. Most men never learn to feel the difference in their own body. I had learned it. That night, standing in the dark of the East Gallery with my rifle grounded and my gloved hands folded over the muzzle, I felt the difference before I understood it. The East Gallery ran the length of the old wing, and at its far end, behind a set of double doors banded in blackened iron, lay the Queen's cabinet. That was the room's true name, though half the young footmen called it the Jewel Room and the other half did not speak of it at all. It was where the Crown of Eldermore kept the personal jewels of its queens, not the state regalia, which lived under lock and ledger in the deep vault beneath the keep, but the private pieces. The rings a queen was given on her betrothal, the pearls she wore to her children's christenings, the small worn things that a great house treasures precisely because they are not grand. When Queen Isolde died, her jewels had been gathered there and left by the king's own order exactly as she had kept them, untouched, waiting, a grief the size of a room, locked behind iron and given a guard. That guard most nights was me. I had not asked for the post. No one asks for the graveyard watch over a dead woman's rings, but I had stood the late Queen's funeral without a tremor, and Captain Rennick had a memory for such things, and so when the roster came round to the small hours in the East Wing, my name was on it more often than not. I did not mind. There are worse ways to spend a night than in the company of a good memory. Queen Isolde had been kind to the men who served her, kind in the plain, unremarkable way that costs a great person nothing and means everything to a small one. She had learned my name. She had asked once about my mother's health. When you have been furniture your whole working life and someone treats you as a man, you do not forget it. So I guarded her jewels the way I would have guarded her, and I told myself the two things were not so different. The hour that belongs to no one deepened. Somewhere far below, a clock in the long hall counted 3, its strokes coming up through the floor more as a shudder than a sound. I had been on since midnight. My relief, young Perrin, would come at 4. Between those two facts stretched an ocean of quiet, and I stood in it and let it hold me. And then in the quiet, a wrongness. It was nothing I could have written in a report. It was not a sound, exactly, or it was a sound so small that naming it would make it larger than it was. A whisper of movement where movement had no business being. The faint, particular sigh a heavy door makes when a careful hand persuades it open 1 inch at a time, trying to cheat the hinge of its voice. I had heard that sigh 10,000 times in 11 years. I could have told you, blind, which of the palace's 40 great doors was speaking. This one was the door to the Queen's cabinet, and no one had passed me to reach it. That was the part my body understood before my mind did. No one had passed me. The only way to the cabinet from the inhabited wings ran through the East Gallery, past my post, under my eyes. I had let no one by. Which meant that whoever was easing that iron-banded door open in the dark had come to it another way, through the old servants' passage that threaded behind the gallery wall, a passage that had been bricked at one end since before my time, and was supposed to be dead. Supposed to be. There is a great deal of the palace that is supposed to be one thing and is quietly another. I did not move at once. That is the first discipline and the hardest to explain to men who have never worn the uniform. You do not act on the first prick of alarm. You confirm. A guard who lunges at every shadow is worse than useless. He is a danger because the day he is truly needed, no one will believe him. So I stood, and I made myself breathe slow, and I listened past the drum of my own blood until the wrongness resolved into fact. There it was again, the sigh of the door, then the whisper of a foot set down with enormous care on the old parquet, a foot in something soft, a slippered foot, not a boot. Then a pause long, the pause of someone standing utterly still in the dark, and listening for exactly the thing I was doing, which was standing utterly still in the dark and listening. For a moment the whole east wing was two people pretending to be empty rooms. I moved then. Not toward the cabinet, away from it first, 3 silent strides back into the deeper shadow of the gallery's mouth, where a fluted pillar and the fall of a long curtain made a pocket of black that a man my size could stand inside and simply cease to be seen. I had learned that pocket years ago, the way you learn every inch of a place you guard. From inside it I could see the length of the gallery, the pale runner of moonlight, the high windows laid down the parquet, and at the far end the iron door, standing now a hand's breadth ajar, with lamplight leaking gold through the gap. Lamplight. Someone had carried a light in, someone unhurried enough and sure enough of being alone to want to see. I waited. My rifle I had grounded silently against the pillar. A rifle is a poor companion in a corridor, and I had no intention of using it, then or ever, against whoever stood in that room. But I loosed the leather over the baton at my belt with 2 fingers, by feel, the motion so practiced it made no sound. And I settled my weight and I fixed my eyes on the gap of gold, and I gave the wrongness time to become a person. It took longer than I expected. Whoever was in the cabinet was thorough. I heard, faint and unmistakable, the small sounds of a search that is trying to be a theft, the lift and set down of a lid, the whisper of velvet, the tiny metallic tick of a clasp worked open by fingers that did not want it to click. Once a soft exhalation, not quite a word, more the sound a person makes to themselves when they have found the thing they came for. My jaw tightened under the chin strap. I made it loosen. Anger is a luxury a guard cannot afford at the moment he most wants it. It makes the hands quick and the judgment slow, and I needed the reverse. Then the light shifted. It swelled and steadied and came toward the door, and the door sighed wider, and a figure stepped out into the pale runner of moonlight with a small shielded lamp in one hand. I knew her at once. Of course I knew her. I had stood at attention for her 1,000 times. I had opened doors for her and closed them, had ridden the box of her carriage through cheering streets, had heard her voice pitched sweet for a crowd and pitched cold for a servant, and had schooled my face to nothing through all of it, as I was sworn to do. Queen Consort Morwenna, the king's second wife, the living queen of Eldermore, standing in the dead queen's gallery at 3 in the morning, with the dead queen's lamplit jewels cupped in a fold of her own dark shawl. For one breath I did not believe my eyes, and I am not ashamed to write it. The mind rebels against certain sights the way the body rebels against a wound. It insists there has been a mistake, that surely the pain belongs to someone else. Surely this was some errand of grief, some sanctioned midnight visit. Surely the Queen Consort had every right in the world to walk where she pleased in her own husband's house. And then she turned her head to listen, the way a thief listens, and the lamplight caught her face, and I saw on it not grief but the tight, bright, guilty concentration of a person taking what they know is not theirs. And every excuse I had begun to build for her fell down at once, as such excuses always do, under the plain weight of a face. In the fold of her shawl, catching the light, lay the Isolde parure. I knew it as I knew my own hands. The late queen had worn it at the christening of each of her children, a collar of old diamonds set round a single deep sapphire the color of a winter dusk, with the earrings and the 2 bracelets that went with it. It was not the most valuable thing in that room, though it was valuable beyond a guardsman's reckoning. It was the most beloved. When the realm pictured Queen Isolde, it pictured that sapphire at her throat. To the crown it was an heirloom. To the king it was, I think, the last of her he could still hold in his hand. And it was going out the door in his second wife's shawl, in the hour that belongs to no one, toward a passage that was supposed to be dead. I stepped out of the dark. I did it the only way I know how, without haste, without a raised voice, without the smallest flourish that might turn a grave thing into a scene. I simply left the pocket of shadow and stood in the center of the moonlit runner between the Queen Consort and the far end of the gallery, and let her see me. The red of the tunic gone to gray in that light, the tall black shape of the bearskin, the white gloves, the stillness. A wall where a moment before there had been only empty air. She stopped as though she had walked into glass. For a long instant neither of us spoke. I watched the calculation move behind her eyes. I had seen that same swift, private arithmetic on other faces in other corridors, the mind of a cornered person racing through its options and pricing each one. Bluff, command, charm, rage, flight. She was clever. I will grant her that to the end of my days. She chose in the space of a breath, and she chose command, because command was what had always worked for her before on men like me. Guardsman, her voice came low and even, pitched to carry no farther than the 2 of us, and there was not a tremor in it. You are dismissed from this post. Return to the guardroom. I have no further need of you tonight. I did not move. I did not answer. That, too, is a discipline that in the first exchange you give the other person nothing to push against, no argument to seize, no crack to widen. You are the wall. The wall does not debate. Her mouth tightened. Did you hear me? I said you are dismissed. I heard the Queen Consort, I said, and then nothing more. The lamp trembled the smallest degree in her hand, the first thing about her that betrayed the hour and the deed. Behind her, through the still open door, the dark of the Queen's cabinet waited, and the velvet lid stood open, and Queen Isolde's rings lay scattered where careful hands had left them in their hurry. And between that plundered room and the dead passage that would have carried the sapphire out of the house forever, there stood one man in a red coat who had heard the order and had not obeyed it. Everything that came after, the reckoning, the escort, the long strange dawn, and the choice the king himself would set before me before it was through, everything turned on that one motionless moment in the gallery. But I did not know it yet. I knew only what was in front of me, a queen, a lamp, a fistful of a dead woman's grief, and a duty older than any order she could give. I set my feet a little wider on the parquet, and I waited for her to understand that the wall was not going to move. She understood. I watched her understand it, and I watched, with something that was almost pity if pity could be so cold, the exact moment she decided to test whether the wall was real. She came toward me. She did it slowly. The lamp held a little higher now, and she smiled, the practiced, warming smile I had seen turned on ambassadors and grieving widows, and the odd frightened child at a garden fete, the smile that had carried her from a minor house at the edge of the realm to the arm of the King of Eldermore. It was a considerable smile. I do not doubt it had opened doors for her that neither birth nor merit would have opened. She brought it to within 4 feet of me and stopped, and in the closer light I could see the sapphire in the fold of her shawl breathing its winter blue, and I could see, too, the fine sheen of sweat at her hairline that the smile was working so hard to make me disregard. Kern, she said. She had learned my name after all. That was worth noting, and I noted it. It is Kern, isn't it? You've stood this wing many nights. The captain speaks well of you. A pause waited. I know how this must look. Madam, but you are a sensible man and a discreet one, and I am going to trust you with something because I have no choice and because I believe I have judged you rightly. She let the smile soften into confidence, the way you take a wild thing into your palm. These pieces are not safe here. There has been, I cannot tell you everything, you understand, but there has been a threat. Word reached me tonight, too late for the proper channels, that the late Queen's jewels were to be moved out of the palace by persons who have no right to them. I could not raise the alarm without alerting the very people I feared, so I came myself. A queen may go where a summons cannot. I am removing them to safety. In the morning it will all be explained, and you, Kern, will have your part in the saving of them. It was a good lie. I have had years to think about it since, and I still say it was a good lie, quick, plausible, flattering, and shaped exactly to the crack it hoped to find in a loyal man. The fear of being the fool who let a treasure be lost by standing on procedure. A lesser guard, or a greener one, might have wavered. The lie gave him a way to disobey his orders and feel like a hero doing it. But I had grounded my rifle against a pillar and stepped out of the dark to face the living Queen of Eldermore over a dead one's jewels, and I had not done that lightly, and I was not going to be talked back into the shadow now. "Madam," I said, "if the late Queen's jewels are in danger, then the danger is met the same way whatever its name. Nothing leaves this wing until the captain of the guard and the king's household have seen it counted. That is the standing order on this room. It does not change because the hour is late, or because the threat is grave, or because it is you who tells me of it. If anything, madam, it changes least of all because it is you." The smile did not fall so much as freeze. For a moment it hung on her face like frost on a pane, and behind it I saw the woman calculate again, faster this time, and arrive at the truth she had been avoiding since I stepped out of the wall, that this one was not going to be moved. "You would question the word of your queen." It was not a question. It had gone flat and cold, the warmth switched off like a shuttered lamp. "I would confirm it, madam, before I let the late Queen's parure leave the palace in the dark. That is not the same as questioning it. The order I keep does not permit me to tell the difference between a queen and a thief by their word alone. It permits me to tell the difference by daylight and by a ledger and by the captain's own hand on the count. Give me those three things and the jewels may go anywhere the crown decrees. Until then they go back into that room." "They will not," she said. "Then, madam, neither will you leave this gallery, and neither will I, until someone with the authority to settle it arrives to do so. I have already sent word." That was not strictly true. I had sent no word, for I had not moved from my post to do so, and there had been no one to send. But it was true enough within the next minute, because a guard's post in that wing was not so lonely as it looked, and I had a means of raising the house that did not require me to leave the woman and the sapphire unwatched for even a breath. Along the gallery wall, at the height of a man's hand, ran a row of small brass pulls, each connected by a wire to a bell box in the guardroom 2 floors down, and to the captain's own quarters beyond it. They were old and they were seldom used, and half the young footmen did not know they were live. I knew. I had tested them myself, quietly, on a dull night, the way a careful man tests every tool he might one day need in a hurry. I did not take my eyes from the Queen Consort. I did not shift my stance or telegraph the reach. I simply let my gloved left hand fall, slow and easy, to my side and found the nearest pull by memory and drew it down its full travel and let it spring back. Once, twice, 3 times the guardroom's signal for the east wing, come at once, no alarm to the house. Somewhere below me, in a room I could not see, a small brass hammer was striking a small brass bell 3 times in the dark, and a sergeant was coming up out of his chair with his heart in his mouth. Morwenna heard nothing. The wire ran inside the wall and the bell was 2 floors down. She saw only a guardsman standing at ease with one hand at his side, and she took my stillness for the paralysis of a man who did not dare stop her, and she made her second mistake of the night, which was to believe she still had time. "Stand aside," she said, "or I will have you broken. I will have your name and your post and the coat off your back. You will spend the rest of your small life regretting this hour. Do you understand what I can do to a man like you, Kern? Do you understand how little you are?" I understood perfectly. That was the terrible thing, and I think she saw it land, that I was not defying her out of ignorance of what it would cost. I knew to the penny what a queen consort could do to a guardsman who crossed her. I had watched her do it to others for far smaller things. A footman dismissed without a character for a spill at dinner. A lady's maid sent away weeping for a word she had not even said. I knew the machinery, and I knew it would grind me if she willed it, order or no order, right or no right, because that is how power that has forgotten itself behaves. I understand what you can do to me, madam, I said. I have understood it since before you came out of that room. It does not change my answer. Put the late queen's jewels back where you found them, and wait with me for the captain, and I will speak of your name at the reckoning with more mercy than you are offering mine. Or keep them in your shawl, and I will speak of it with none. But you will not carry them out of this wing tonight. There is no version of this hour in which you do. She stared at me, and in her staring I watched the last of the warmth go out of her, and the calculation with it, and something older and uglier come up in its place. The fury of a person who has always been able to make the world move and has met, for the first time in a long time, a thing that will not. Then I will carry them out over you, she said very quietly, and I will tell the king you attacked me. There it was, the oldest weapon in the world and the ugliest, and the one against which discipline is the only shield. She would make herself the victim and me the crime. A woman's word against a guardsman's, a queen's against a nobody's, and she had the ledger of power all on her side of it. If she reached the passage, if she got clear of the wing with the parure and a mark on her cheek she could raise herself with her own fingernail, then by morning I would be the guardsman who had laid hands on the queen consort in the dark, and no order I had kept and no truth I could tell would outweigh the picture of it. She had found the one move that turned my own restraint into a trap. I could not touch her, and she knew I could not, and she meant to walk out through the space where my hands were forbidden to be. And so she came on. She did not rush me. That would have been a scuffle, and a scuffle could be survived and explained. She did something far cannier. She stepped, slow and deliberate, to my left, meaning to pass me along the wall, close enough that any movement of mine to check her would look, to any witness who arrived at the wrong second, like the beginning of an assault. She was daring me to move. She was betting 11 years of my discipline against 1 instant of her nerve, and she was not a fool to bet it, because the truth is that most men in that gallery would have grabbed her arm. It is the natural thing. It is what the body wants. A treasure walking out the door and a hand's reach able to stop it. Every instinct in me leaned toward that arm. I did not take it. Instead, I did the harder thing, the thing they do not put in the manual because it cannot be taught to a man who does not already have it in him. I moved, not to seize her, but to be in front of her. I gave ground along the wall precisely as fast as she took it, keeping my body between her and the far mouth of the gallery, never touching her, never so much as brushing the fringe of her shawl, a wall that would not strike and would not yield and would not, above all, be got around. It is a thing you learn in crowd lines, holding back oppressive bodies with nothing but presence and position and the willingness to be shoved and not shoved back. I had held drunk men so, and grieving men, and once a whole surging tide of mourners at Isolde's own gate. I could hold one furious queen. "You dare," she breathed, and now there was a thread of something else under the fury, the first cold wire of fear, because a person who has always been able to make others flinch feels the ground move when one of them will not. "You dare block your queen." "I dare keep the order, madam," I said. "I have not touched you. I will not touch you. Look at my hands." And I raised them slowly, both of them, white-gloved and open and empty, out to my sides at the height of my shoulders, the plainest gesture of a man who is offering no violence, holding no weapon, laying no hand, and I kept my body squarely in her path, and I let her see that whatever tale she carried out of this gallery, it would not be the tale of a guard who struck her, because there would be no mark, no grip, no bruise, nothing but a red coat that had stood where it was sworn to stand. It stopped her. For the length of 3 heartbeats it stopped her cold, my open hands and my planted feet, and the plain fact of a witness she could not manufacture. And in those 3 heartbeats, the thing I had set in motion below arrived. I heard them on the stair, the particular quick heavy tread of guardsmen moving fast and trying to move quiet, boots on the old service steps, more than one man. Morwenna heard it too. I saw the sound reach her, saw her head turn a fraction toward the far end of the gallery, saw the whole desperate arithmetic start over again behind her eyes with a new and terrible sum in it. Too late. She was too late, and she knew it in the same instant I did. And for a moment her face was naked in a way I would not wish on an enemy. The face of someone watching a door close that they had been perfectly certain would stay open forever. Sergeant Bram Holloway came up out of the stairwell first, still buttoning his tunic, his own face a study in confusion resolving fast into alarm, and behind him 2 of the night watch with lanterns unshielded now, so that all at once the pale moonlit gallery was full of hard yellow light and hard-breathing men, and the small private crime of the hour that belongs to no one became, in the space of a breath, a public fact. Holloway took it in me with my hand still half raised, the Queen Consort 4 feet off with a lamp in one hand and her shawl clutched to her breast, the iron door of the cabinet standing open behind her with the velvet lids gaping, and I watched him make the same journey I had made a quarter hour before. Disbelief, the search for an innocent explanation, and then the collapse of that search under the plain weight of what was in front of him. He was a good sergeant, Holloway, 20 years in the coat. He did not gape, and he did not blunder. He came to a halt at a proper distance, brought his heels together, and gave the Queen Consort the salute her rank required, because whatever she had done she was still the Queen Consort, and the forms are the forms and a guard does not decide otherwise on his own authority. "Your Majesty," he said, and then to me without turning his head, "Kern, report." "Sergeant," my voice came out level. I was glad of that. At 3 of the clock I heard the door of the Queen's cabinet open from within, by way of the old passage, no one having passed my post. I confirmed and observed. The Queen Consort came out of the cabinet carrying the late Queen's jewels, the Isolde parure and other pieces in the fold of her shawl. She ordered me from my post. I declined, the standing order on this room being that nothing leaves it save by daylight, by ledger, and by the captain's count. She attempted to pass me. I placed myself in her path without laying hand upon her. I rang for the guardroom. That is the whole of it, Sergeant, to this minute. The gallery was very quiet when I finished. The 2 watchmen stood frozen with their lanterns. Holloway's jaw worked once, and Morwenna, who had been silent through all of it, drew herself up to her full height and turned the full force of her office upon the sergeant, because if the guardsman would not break then perhaps the sergeant would. "He is lying," she said, "and he is mad besides. I came to the late Queen's rooms to grieve, as is my right, as is any wife's right in the house of her husband, and this man accosted me in the dark and has held me here against my will with threats. Look at him, Sergeant. Look at his hands still raised as if to strike me. Arrest him. Arrest him now, and I will remember which of my guards knew his duty tonight and which did not. I have thought a great deal since about the position I put Sergeant Holloway in that night. It was cruel in its way, though I had no gentler choice. Here stood the Queen Consort of Eldermore, the 2nd highest woman in the realm, commanding him plainly, on her honor, to arrest a fellow guardsman for assault. And here stood that guardsman, hands raised and empty, telling a flatly different tale. One of us was lying. The forms did not tell him which. His whole training bent him toward obedience to the higher rank. Every year in the coat had taught him that the guard does not judge the crown, the guard serves it. If he obeyed her and she was lying, he would help a thief escape and destroy an honest man. If he defied her and I was lying, he would lay hands on his queen on the word of a subordinate and end his own career and mine together. There was a way through it. There is nearly always a way through for a man who keeps his head and remembers that the order is wiser than any one moment. Holloway found it. He did not arrest me, and he did not defy the Queen Consort either. He did the thing the standing order permitted him to do, the thing that answered both stories at once and prejudged neither. "Your Majesty," he said, and his voice was steady and grave and very respectful, "I would sooner cut off my own hand than fail in my duty to the crown, and if a guardsman of mine has offered you insult, I will see him broken for it before the day is out, on my honor. But there is a standing order on this room, set by the king's own household, and it binds me as it binds Kern, and it will bind the captain when he comes. Nothing that has left the queen's cabinet may go back into the palace, and nothing may leave this wing, until it is counted against the ledger by the captain of the guard in the presence of the king's household. That order does not ask whose hands the jewels are in. It asks only that they be counted. I cannot arrest a man, Your Majesty, and I cannot let the pieces pass until that count is made. It is not for me to say who is honest here tonight. It is only for me to see that the ledger is kept. I beg Your Majesty's patience while I send for the captain." It was beautifully done. I could have embraced him. He had refused her command without a breath of insolence. Sheltered behind the order the way a good soldier shelters behind a wall his betters built, and made her own rank the reason he could not do as she asked, for the order came from the king, and not even the Queen Consort could set aside the king's order on the strength of a grievance, not in front of witnesses, not without confessing that she had reason to fear a count. And that was the hinge of it, and she felt the hinge turn. A count. Everything came down to a count now. If she were innocent, if she had truly come to grieve as she claimed, and the jewels in her shawl were some misunderstanding, then a count could only clear her, and she should have welcomed it, should have demanded it, should have thrust the parure into Holloway's hands and cried, "Let it be counted. Let this madman be shamed." An innocent woman fears no ledger. She did not demand the count. She fought it, and in fighting it she told every man in that gallery, more plainly than any confession, what she was. "I will not be counted," she said, and her voice had climbed now, losing its careful pitch, gaining an edge that carried down the gallery and woke the echoes. "I am the queen. I am not a parcel of goods to be tallied by servants at 3 in the morning. You forget yourselves, all of you, you forget who I am and who you are. I am leaving this wing, and I am taking these pieces to a place of safety, and any man who lays a hand on me or on them will answer to the king for it in the morning. Now stand aside." She turned not toward the passage now, that was cut off behind her, but toward the near end of the gallery, toward the stair the guardsman had come up, meaning simply to walk out through them, to force the men of her own household to either seize their queen or let her pass. She had one weapon left, and she played it, the sheer unthinkableness of laying hands on her. She was betting that no guardsman alive would dare take hold of the Queen Consort of Eldermore, and that the order, for all its stern words, would break against that unthinkableness like water against stone. It very nearly did. I saw the watchman shrink back a half step as she came at them, saw even Holloway's certainty flicker, because he had never in 20 years laid a hand on a royal person, and every fiber of him screamed against beginning now. For one heartbeat the wall of men wavered, and the gap of the stairhead yawned open beyond them, and Queen Isolde's sapphire came within a stride of walking out of her house forever on the strength of a bluff. Then I spoke, and I spoke to the men, not to her, because it was the men who had to hold, and the men who had to be given something firmer to hold to than their own reeling nerves. "Hold your posts," I said. "No one lays a hand on the queen. No one, but no one stands aside either. Close the stairhead. Sergeant, the door to the passage. We do not touch her, we do not touch the jewels, and we do not let either leave this gallery. We only wait. Let her go where she likes within these 4 walls. There is no way out of them that we have not shut. We keep the order, and we wait for the captain, and we do not, any of us, give her the one thing she wants, which is a man's hand on her arm to make a story of. Hold." They held, bless them, they held. The watchmen closed the stairhead shoulder to shoulder, lanterns high, faces set, and did not touch her. Holloway put himself before the mouth of the old passage, and I kept the center of the gallery, and the Queen Consort of Eldermore found herself ringed about by her own guard in a square of moonlight and lantern light, untouched, unharmed, unhandled, and utterly contained. She could rage. She could not leave. And with every minute that passed, the Count came closer, and the Count was the one thing in the world she could not survive. She turned a slow circle in the middle of us, the lamp guttering in her shaking hand, and looked from face to face for the crack that was not there, and found none, and understood at last, I think, that the walls of a house are not only stone. Sometimes they are men. I want to be honest about what it cost to hold that square, because a listener who has never done it will imagine it was easy for me, and it was not. Every minute we stood there was a minute in which 1,000 small doubts crept in at the edges of my resolve. What if I was wrong? What if there truly had been a threat, and I had blundered into the middle of a saving, and by morning I would be the fool who held the Queen at bay while the real thieves slipped clear? The mind does that to a man under strain. It turns his own certainty against him, whispers that surely a queen would not, surely there is an innocent tale, surely you have made a dreadful mistake and are too proud to see it. I felt all of that. I stood in the cold lantern light with my heart going hard and my palms wet inside the white gloves, and I felt the whole weight of who she was pressing down on the small, stubborn fact of what I had seen. And there were long moments when it would have been the easiest thing in the world to decide that I must have been mistaken and step aside and let the terrible night dissolve. What held me was not courage exactly. It was Isolde. I kept thinking of the late queen, of the plain, unhurried way she had learned my name, of the morning she had asked after my mother and then, weeks later, remembered to ask again whether she was mended, which is a thing the great almost never do. I thought of standing in the honor guard at her lying-in state, of the small hours I had kept beside her coffin while the candles burned down, of the way the whole realm had come to file past her and weep for a woman most of them had only ever seen at a distance, because she had been the kind of person you could weep for. And I thought, they are her rings. They are the last of her that anyone can still hold in a hand. And whatever is true or not true about threats and passages and the hearts of living queens, I will not be the man who let the last of Isolde walk out into the dark on a stranger's word. If I am wrong, let me be wrong and broken for it. But I will be broken standing where she would have wanted me to stand. That thought, and not any grand idea of duty, was the thing that kept my feet on the parquet. The order was in my head, but Isolde was in my chest, and she was the heavier of the two. So I held, and the men held with me, and the doubt did its worst and did not win, and we waited out the long minutes until the captain came. "You will all hang for this," she said, but the words had gone hollow. Even she did not believe them anymore. We waited. The clock in the long hall came up through the floor and told the quarter, and then the half. And at last, on the stair, a new tread, slower than Holloway's, heavier, the measured, deliberate tread of a man who has been woken with grave news and has taken the time to dress fully before he comes, because he knows that what he walks into will be steadied by the sight of a captain in good order. Captain Josiah Rennick came up into the gallery with his sword belt buckled and his face carved from oak, and behind him, to my surprise and to Morwenna's visible dismay, came a second figure in the sober black of the king's household, Chamberlain Aldy's Vane, the keeper of the ledgers, the one man in the palace whose signature could open the queen's cabinet or close it, roused from his bed and grimmer than I had ever seen him. The Count had come. Captain Rennick did not waste words. He took in the gallery the way a surgeon takes in a wound, quickly, wholly, without flinching from any part of it, and then he did the thing that made him a captain and the rest of us merely men. He gave the Queen Consort the salute her rank required, deep and correct, and he addressed her with a courtesy so perfect it had an edge like a razor. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am sorry beyond my power to say that the hour and the circumstance have brought us here. The standing order on this room is the king's, made after the late queen's death, at his express command, that her private jewels should not be moved, altered, nor removed from her cabinet save by daylight, and by account taken against the ledger in the presence of the household. It is not within my authority to set that order aside, and I say plainly that it would not be within your majesty's either, for it is the king's, and only the king may lift it. I ask, therefore, I do not command, for I cannot command your majesty, but I ask on my duty that the pieces you are holding be laid upon this table and counted against the ledger by Chamberlain Vane. If the count is right, and every piece the late queen owned is here and accounted for, then your majesty walks from this gallery with my apology and my resignation both, and Kern here answers for the gravest error a guardsman ever made. But the count must be taken. There is no road out of this room, for any of us, that does not run through the ledger. He said it before her flawlessly. He had given her the way out that an innocent woman would have seized with both hands. Lay them down, let them be counted, be cleared, and watch her accusers ruin themselves. He had even offered his own head, his resignation, freely, if the count came out clean. No guilty man offers his own head on the turn of a card he has stacked. Every soul in that gallery understood the offer, and understood that it was fair, and understood that to refuse it was to confess. I watched Morwenna's face, and I saw her measure the trap from every side and find no gap in it, and I saw the moment she understood that she was going to have to lay the sapphire down. She had not planned for the count. She had planned for a sleeping wing and a dead passage, and one guardsman she could dismiss or frighten or slander. She had never once, in all her arithmetic, planned for the ledger, because the ledger did not care who she was, and everything she had ever done had depended on people caring very much who she was. She laid them down. She did it with as much scorn as she could summon, sweeping the fold of her shawl open over the long table with a gesture meant to say that this was beneath her, that she surrendered to the tedium of small men and their small books, that the whole business was an outrage she would remember. But her hands shook as she did it, and the pieces spilled across the dark wood, catching the lantern light, the rings, the 2 bracelets, the earrings, and last of all, rolling a little on its collar of old diamonds until it came to rest with the great sapphire uppermost, the parure. Queen Isolde's parure, out of its velvet on a bare table, at 4 in the morning, in the hands of the woman who had come to carry it out of the house. Chamberlain Vane opened his ledger. He was an old man and a dry one, with no warmth in him that I had ever found, but I will say this for Aldous Vane. He did his office that night as if the king himself stood at his shoulder, and his voice did not shake and his finger did not hurry down the column, and he counted the late queen's jewels one by one against the record made the week she died, and he named each piece aloud as he touched it, so that there could be no doubt afterward, no whisper of a miscount, no shadow of a guard's mistake. The betrothal ring, 1 sapphire and old-cut brilliants, present. The christening pearls, 1 strand, 40 and 1, present. The mourning ring of the Dowager Rosalind, gifted, 1, present. On and on, the dry old voice naming a dead woman's life piece by piece into the lantern light, while the living queen stood rigid and white beside the table and the guardsmen held their square and did not touch her. The parure, the collar, 1, the sapphire pendant, 1, the earrings, a pair, the bracelets, a pair. He touched each as he named it. He came to the end of the column. He was silent a moment, checking, an old careful man who would not be hurried into either the accusation or the acquittal. Then he looked up, first at the captain, then, with a strange grave courtesy that was almost gentleness, at the Queen Consort. "The count is complete," he said. "Every piece the late queen owned at her death is present on this table. Nothing is missing." A pause. "Nothing is missing because nothing has left the wing." And then so quietly that a man had to lean to hear it, the sentence that decided everything. "But every piece is here, your majesty, out of its velvet in the small hours, gathered together as if for carrying. The ledger records what is present. It cannot record what was intended. That is not for me to weigh." He closed the book. "That is for the king." For the king. The words fell into the gallery like a stone into a well, and I heard them go all the way down, Because of course it had come to that and had always been going to come to that, from the moment I stepped out of the wall. This was beyond a captain, beyond a chamberlain, beyond any order a household could keep. A queen consort had been caught at the late queen's jewels in the dark. There was only one man in the realm who could sit in judgment on that, and he was, as it happened, the one man in the realm to whom those jewels meant the most. It was Morwenna who broke the silence, and she broke it in the only way left to her, which was to try, one last time, to make the story hers before the king could hear it from other mouths. "You will wake my husband," she said, and there was a new note in it now, low and quick, the note of someone laying rails ahead of a train they cannot stop, "and you will tell him what? That his wife came to grieve and was set upon by guards and made to stand like a criminal while an old clerk pawed through his first wife's trinkets. Is that the tale you will carry to the king?" She turned on me, and her eyes in the lantern light were bright and terrible. "You think you have won something tonight, guardsman. You have not. You have made an enemy of the woman who shares the king's bed, and you have set my word against yours before the throne. And whose word do you imagine he will take, a stranger in a red coat, or the wife who lies beside him? He is a grieving man. Grieving men do not want to hear that they chose a thief. They would sooner break the man who told them. You have not saved yourself tonight. You have only chosen the manner of your ruin. And the terrible thing, the thing I have to set down honestly because this is a true account and not a comfortable one, is that I did not know in that moment that she was wrong. She had named the real danger with a thief's clear sight. A grieving king, a beloved dead wife, a living wife swearing her innocence with tears, and one guardsman's word to weigh against a crown. I had kept the order. I had held the wall. And it was entirely possible that keeping the order had cost me everything, and that the king, rather than face what his second marriage had brought into his house, would find it easier to break the man who forced him to see it. I stood in the ring of lanterns with the count complete, and the sapphire on the table and the dawn not yet in the windows, and for the first time that whole long night, I was afraid. Captain Rennick sent for the king. He did not ask the Queen Consort's leave to do it, and he did not soften it. He turned to one of the watchmen and gave the order plainly, "Rouse the king's chamberlain of the body," and through him the king, with word that the standing order on the late queen's cabinet had been invoked in the night, and that his majesty's presence was required. Then he set the rest of us to wait, and he did a thing I have never forgotten. He took up a position beside me at my shoulder, so that, when the king came, he would find his captain standing not apart from the accused guardsman but with him. It was the plainest way a man can say "I believe you" without saying a word, and I have loved Josiah Rennick for it every day since. The wait was long. The king did not come quickly, and I understood why. He would have had to be woken, and told again because the first telling would not have been believed, and then he would have had to dress, and to master his face, and to walk the length of a palace toward a thing no husband should ever have to walk toward. The windows of the gallery had begun to gray at their edges by the time we heard him. Not a tread this time, but a change in the house itself, a stirring and a straightening, the sound of doors held and heads bowed all down the long corridor as the King of Eldermore passed through his own home in the last dark of the night. He came into the gallery alone, which surprised me, though later I understood it. He had left his own household at the door. Whatever was to happen here, King Alaric of the House of Harrowgate meant to face it as a man and not behind a screen of officers. He was not dressed for state. He wore a plain dark coat thrown over night clothes, and his gray hair was uncombed, and his face, I had seen that face schooled to marble through a state funeral, and I saw now what the marble had been holding. His face was the face of a man who has been told a thing he would have given his kingdom not to hear. He stopped just inside the gallery, and he looked at it all. He looked at the guardsmen in their square. He looked at the open door of the cabinet and the gaping velvet. He looked at his second wife standing white and rigid beside the long table. And then he looked at the table, and at what lay spilled across it in the lantern light, and I watched the king of Eldermore see his first wife's jewels out of their velvet at 4 in the morning, and I watched him understand in one breath, without a word from any of us, exactly what he had walked into. Grief is a swift teacher. He needed no ledger. He knew that sapphire as I knew it. He knew the only reason it would be lying bare on a table in the dark. For a long moment the king said nothing at all, and the silence was worse than any shouting could have been. Then Morwenna moved. She crossed to him quickly before anyone could speak, before the tale could be told in any voice but hers, and she took his arm, and the tears came, and they were good tears. I will grant her that to the last. They came on command, and they came convincingly, and her voice broke on them in exactly the right place. "Alaric, thank God you have come. Alaric, they have shamed me, your guards, in the dark. I came to her rooms only to grieve, only to sit a while among her things, because the day is her memorial and I could not sleep. And this man," she flung out a hand at me without looking at me. "This man came at me out of the shadows and held me here like a criminal and would not let me pass, and they have made me stand and be counted like a thief in my own husband's house. I have never been so used. Send them away, Alaric. Send them all away, and let us forget this dreadful night ever happened." It was very well done. If I had not stood in the dark and watched her come out of that room with the sapphire in her shawl, I might almost have believed it. And I saw the king waver, not because he was a fool, but because he loved her, or had loved her, or wanted still to be a man who could love her, and because everything she said offered him a door out of the room he did not want to be standing in. He could take that door. He could choose to believe her. He could send us away and let the night close over itself, and no one in the realm would ever gainsay the king. She was offering him peace at the price of one guardsman. It is not a hard bargain for a tired, grieving man. I have seen kinder men take it. He turned to me, and I understood that the whole night, the wall and the count and the long, cold waiting, had all been for this one question in a gray dawn, from a king who did not want to hear the answer. "Guardsman," he said. His voice was low and worn to the grain. "You will tell me what happened here, and you will tell me the truth, because I will know if you do not, and because there is a dead woman in this room whose things are on that table, and she is owed the truth if no one else is." So I told him. I told it plainly, and I told it whole, the way I had told Holloway, without a word of malice and without softening a single fact. The door opened from the dead passage, the count of no one passing my post, the Queen Consort coming out with the parure in her shawl, the order to leave my post, my refusal, the offered lie about a threat, the attempt to pass me, my open, empty hands, the bell, the wall of men who did not touch her, the count that found every piece present and out of its velvet in the dark. I left out nothing and I added nothing. And at the end, because it was true and because he had asked for the truth, I said the one thing that was hardest to say to the face of a grieving king. "Your Majesty, I do not know what was in the Queen Consort's heart tonight, and it is not my place to say. I know only what my eyes saw and what my order required. The order says that nothing leaves that room in the dark, whoever carries it. I kept the order. If I was wrong to keep it, if there is an innocent reason for what I saw that I am too small to understand, then I will answer for the insult with my life gladly and count it a fair price. But I could not let the late Queen's jewels leave this wing in the night on any word but the Count's, not for a stranger, not for a queen, not your Majesty if it had been you." I paused, and then I said it because it was the whole of what I was. The order does not have a door in it for the people it is meant to stop. If it did, it would not be an order. It would only be a suggestion, kept for the small and lifted for the great. And a thing like that is not worth a man standing all night in the dark to guard. The gallery was silent. Morwenna's hand was still on the king's arm, and King Alaric looked at me for a long time, and then he looked down at the table, at the parure, at the great sapphire the color of a winter dusk that his first wife had worn to the christening of each of their children, and something moved across his worn face that I can only call the return of a man to himself. He reached out and he touched the sapphire, Just touched it, one finger, the way you touch the hand of someone you have lost. And then he closed his fingers around it and lifted it, and held it a moment in the lantern light, and I saw his throat work. I gave this order, the king said, not to me, not to Morwenna, but to the room, to the house, to the dead. The week I buried her. I gave it because I could not bear that her things should be handled and haggled and parceled out while she was scarcely cold, and I could not bear, either God forgive me, I could see it even then, that they should become a temptation to the living. So I set a wall of guards and a wall of ledgers around a dead woman's rings, and I told myself I was being sentimental, an old man clinging to trinkets. He turned the sapphire slowly. I was not being sentimental. I was being prudent, and I hated that I had to be, and tonight I know why I had to be. He looked up. The order held. The wall held. A guardsman I do not know from 100 others stood in the dark and would not be moved by a queen, and because he would not, my Isolde's jewels are on this table and not in a passage. That is not an insult to answer for, guardsman. That is the reason you wear the coat. Morwenna's hand fell from his arm. Alaric, she began, and the tears were gone now, and something else was rising in their place. You cannot mean to take the word of a... I have not taken his word, the king said, and now his voice had changed, and for the first time it was not the voice of a grieving man but the voice of a king, level and cold and final. I have taken the count. Every piece present, Chamberlain, every piece out of its velvet, gathered for carrying in the small hours. Every piece, your majesty, said old Vane, so the ledger records. Then I need no man's word for what was intended, the king said. The ledger has told me, my own eyes have told me, and you, madam, he turned to her at last, and I have never seen a look pass between two people that I would less wish turned on me, you have told me by fighting a count that an innocent woman would have begged for. I have been a long time not seeing you. I think, God help me, I did not want to see, but I see you now. What the king did then he did without heat, and that was the most terrible thing about it and the most kingly. He did not rage. He did not accuse her of theft in so many words, or call for chains, or summon the whole court to witness her disgrace. He had loved her once, or had tried to, and there were children of the house to think of, and a king does not tear his own household to rags in a corridor at dawn even when it deserves tearing. He did the thing that was exactly measured to the wrong, no more, and not one grain less. You will not sleep in this palace again, he said to her quietly. Your rooms will be closed within the hour, and your things sent after you to the dower house at Ashgrove, where you will live, provided for as your rank requires and no further, and from which you will not come to court unless I send for you, which I will not. You will part from nothing of the late queen's now or ever, not a ring, not a pearl, not a thread of her memory, and you will leave this wing at once, not carried, not chained, not shamed before a crowd that need never know the whole of this, but escorted as a person of your rank is escorted, out of the house you were caught trying to rob. He looked at Captain Rennick. Captain, see the Queen Consort to her carriage. Let it be done with every courtesy and no delay. And let the guardsman who kept my order keep her to the door. I did not expect that last. I think Rennick did not either. I saw his eyes flick to me. But an order is an order, and the king had given it, and there was a rightness in it that I understood even as it startled me, that the man who had stood the wall should be the man to walk her out of it, so that the whole matter closed in the same hands that had held it. So I did. I will tell you plainly that there was no triumph in it, whatever a listener might imagine. I had dreaded, through the long night, being made her enemy. I had not once imagined being made her escort, and it was a stranger and a heavier thing than enmity. I took up my rifle from where it stood grounded against the pillar, for the forms are the forms, and a guard walks his post armed, and I fell in at the correct distance behind and to the side of the Queen Consort of Eldermore, and I walked her out of the east gallery in the gray light of the coming dawn, past the open door of the cabinet, past the long table where the parure lay under Chamberlain Vane's careful hand. past the square of watchmen who came to attention as she passed because whatever she had done she was, until the moment her carriage rolled through the gates, still the Queen Consort, and the forms are the forms. She did not speak to me. She walked very straight and she looked at no one, and if there were tears now they were not the useful kind and she did not let them fall where anyone could see. Down the great stair we went, and through the long hall where the clock she had feared all night stood ticking, and out at last through a side door into the cold blue air of the forecourt, where a carriage had been brought round and stood waiting with its lamps lit, and its horses stamping in the chill. The first birds were beginning, somewhere beyond the walls. The east was pale. At the carriage step she stopped, and for the first and only time she turned and looked at me, full at me, the way she had not once looked at me through the whole reckoning in the gallery. I braced for the curse, the threat, the promise of ruin. It did not come. She looked at me a long moment, and what was in her face was not hatred, or not only hatred. It was something more like the look of a gambler who has watched the whole table turn and is trying, even now, to understand the one card that turned it. "You could have been anything," she said at last, very low so that only I could hear it. "A man who bends in the right doorway at the right hour for the right person. There is no ceiling on what such a man may rise to. I would have raised you myself. You had only to stand aside. A breath. You stood aside for nothing, for a dead woman's rings and a line in a book. You will die in that coat, guardsman, in the cold at a door, and no one will remember your name." "That may be so, madam," I said. "But the rings are on the table, and the order held, and I will sleep tonight. I think that is the difference between us, and I think you have always known it, and I think it is why you cannot look away from me even now." She had no answer for that. She turned and stepped up into the carriage, and I closed the door upon her with my own gloved hand, gently, for the forms are the forms, and I stepped back and came to attention, and the coachman spoke to the horses, and the carriage of the Queen Consort of Eldermore rolled across the forecourt and out through the gates into the pale morning and did not come back. I stood at attention until it was gone from sight, and then a little longer, because that too is the discipline. You do not relax the instant the eyes leave you. You hold until the thing is truly finished. And then, when it was, I grounded my rifle and let out a breath I felt I had been holding for 11 years, and watched the sun come up over the walls of a house that had kept its honor through the hour that belongs to no one. They asked me afterward whether I had been afraid, the younger guardsman, who heard the tale and could not credit that a man had faced down a queen over a fistful of jewels. I told them the truth, which is that I had been afraid the whole time, and that the fear had nothing to do with it. Courage is not the absence of fear. Any old soldier will tell you that, and most of them are lying about the fear part, and I would rather not. Courage is standing still in the doorway while the fear does its worst inside you. The wall does not feel nothing. The wall simply does not move. Queen Isolde's jewels went back into their velvet that morning, every piece, counted a second time by Chamberlain Vane and sealed under the king's own hand. They were not carried off in the night, and they were not parceled out to the living, and they wait still in the queen's cabinet at the end of the east gallery, guarded, as they were meant to be, by whatever man the roster sends. Often enough in the years since, that man has been me. I do not mind. There are worse ways to spend a night than in the company of a good memory, and the sapphire, the color of a winter dusk, is a very good memory to keep. The king did not make me an officer and did not shower me with gold, and did not stand me up before the court to praise me, and I would have been embarrassed if he had. He did a smaller thing and a better one. Some weeks after that night, passing me at my post in the ordinary way with no one by, he stopped. He did not often stop. He looked at me for a moment, and then he said, quietly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, "She learned your name that night. So did I, Kern." And he inclined his head the smallest degree, the barest nod, a king to a guardsman, and walked on. That is all. That is the whole of the honor I was paid, and it was more than a chest of jewels, and I have never wanted for anything since. The Queen Consort had told me at the carriage step that I would die in that coat in the cold at a door, and that no one would remember my name. She was wrong about the last, though she was right enough about the rest, and I do not fear it. A man who has stood one true wall in his life, and held it when it cost him everything to hold and would have cost him nothing to fall, has been remembered already by the only witness whose memory he needs his own, in the small hours, in the house that did not lose its honor because he did not move. I stood the wall. The rings are on the table, and when my hour comes, cold and at a door as she promised, I will meet it the way I met her, still and unafraid and exactly where I was sworn to be.